if you look at, for example, Amsterdam, just to pay the place that you're renting where the whole thing is going to take place, you need to have 3 buyers every day just to pay that. If you don't get 3 buyers, you're going to end up in below 0, right? So in response to you, I think that journalists might soon realize it wasn't really that empowering. And I also think that that is not representative of the majority of people who enter prostitution, don't have a background in journalism. Sorry.
Can I just interrupt here? In Sweden, they have a law where the customers are prosecuted, but not the sex workers.
Yes.
Does that actually work?
Yeah, it does actually. We were the first country to pass that law, so we kind of just did it like an experiment, let's see what happens. And it was the first time that instead of punishing the prostitute, which always had been the case previously, we focused on demand, on the buyer. So in Sweden, you can sell sex anywhere, outside a church, school, doesn't matter, you're not prosecuted, but you cannot pay for sex. Because the way that we see it is prostitution is incompatible with equality between the sexes. So there's nothing in that about, the prostitute being a victim or something. It is the existence of prostitution in a society affects everyone, affects gender relations between men and women generally, and is incompatible with equality. And my definition of prostitution personally is it's sex between 2 people, one person that wants it and one person who doesn't. If you don't have that criteria, you don't have prostitution. If you have 2 people who want each other, who really want to have sex, they don't pay, obviously. If you have 2 people and nobody wants to have sex, of course there is no sex, right? So prostitution happens when one person wants it, the other person doesn't, and the first person pays the second person. Right, and that's very clear. She might want the money, but if you ask any person in prostitution, you can take the money now. You can leave or you can stay for the sex. How many do you think are going to stay for the sex? I mean, really.
Lydia, I'll bring you in because you actually have a global perspective on this.
Well, yes, I agree. Of course, this journalist that said that she will become a prostitute, and probably 10% of all the women, thousands of women that I've interviewed in my career for these investigations on trafficking, are making a decision, a conscious decision, in a protected environment, and they can choose their clients, and they can be VIP, and even in those conditions, they are exposed to violence in many, many ways. But then what about the rest of the women? Which is public policy now we're talking about. It's like if the rest, let's suppose 80% of the women that are in the sex trade industry are being exploited, abused, and have no real choices, or come not only from poverty, but from other conditions in which they have normalized violence, for example, child abuse and pedophilia for a long, long time, which is a problem we have in every country in the world. Then what about these women? If they have normalized violence in such a way that they do not understand that this is truly exploitation, or there's a way out, then you do have to have public policy in which they have choices. I have to say with the Swedish law, which is really important because I followed 3 cases for a while for my book, 3 of the women, one in particular is an African woman that was given the choice to have a visa, and she was given the choice to study, and she was given the choice to bring her kids to the country to get away from prostitution. And she did it willingly, and she did it happily, and she is just amazingly happy now. And she doesn't feel like she was forced out of prostitution. She feels like she got a chance for the first time in her entire life. I know this is just a single case, but we are documenting a lot of cases like this in Sweden. So the other part of the law is that they are giving them choices and chances and opportunities. So this is of course, we have to talk about all these issues, but it's a gender equality issue. I don't see a lot of women in advanced countries that are exposing themselves to prostitution, as we see in countries in which it's the only choice they have.
Alyssa, we only have time for brief answers at the moment because we're still trying to get to one last question, but what do you think?
I mean, I guess I sort of see, society over and over kind of protecting men at the expense of women, So, I mean, I really, one of the things that just bothers me so much about it is that all of the social stigma of prostitution, legal or illegal, always seems to go to the woman. In America, when a prostitute is murdered, there is this like almost, sort of like reluctance, to even investigate it. When a man is murdered, they don't say, well, wait, let's see if he ever visited a prostitute. prostitute before we decide whether or not his life is worth investigating. So I really think that legal or illegal, the social stigma has to change.
Okay.
Well, this is very, very interesting questions, but I'm always puzzled by why we are so focused on prostitution. I think that feminism is doing itself a disservice by focusing so much on something that affects so few women. I don't agree that prostitution affects all of us. I don't agree with that. And in the, I just did a little bit of Googling on these figures before. We have 3.5 billion women in this world. Very, very few of them are prostitutes. And so it's puzzling to me the amount of attention it's getting as a feminist issue as opposed to the number of women involved.
Yeah, but the number of men involved, though. I mean, if you look at Germany, where 1 in every 4 men pays for sex, he has maybe daughters, he has a wife, she doesn't know that. That affects his way of thinking about women.
Yeah, that's true. Well, does that affect the way? Okay, all right.
No, go on.
No, I have to say something. I know it's very quick, but this is important. John Malarek, it's a Canadian investigative reporter. It's an amazing journalist. He wrote a book on prostitution first, on sex trafficking, and then he ended up writing an amazing book about the Johns, who are the clients. He talked to a lot of them, and the investigation shows that what they want out of prostitution is submission, is to be able to exercise the violence they cannot exercise with a woman in their lives. So there's a component of violence against women within the prostitution issue, that it's a feminist issue, at least for me. And of course, when it's trafficking, when it's slavery, as we know, then it's a must.